So, Anastasia, would you like to tell the audience more about you, like current day?
I would be happy to. This is a little bio and what I say about myself right now in my life. I work as a consultant, coach, and instructor. I help survivors of ritual abuse, mind control, and other forms of organized abuse and professionals who treat them. I earned a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master of social work degree in 92 and 94. I'm 55 years old. I've worked in a variety of health and mental health settings for the most of the last 30 years. For a while, I was certified and licensed as a psychotherapist, which I first earned in 2001. In 2006 and 7, I got a CSAT, or a certification as a trauma and sex addiction therapist. And I provided a specialty private practice, helping people heal from sexual and relationship trauma and compulsions like porn addiction, sex addiction, relationship addiction, which is very deep work and very rewarding to see loving families united after infidelity and other forms of sexual betrayal. So in 2023, I shifted my business, added RAMCOA treatment, RAMCOA, reorganized what was then a corporation into a nonprofit private membership association called SOAR Global, which stands for Support for Organized Abuse and Addiction Recovery. I chose not to renew my license as a licensed independent clinical social worker because I felt there was a lot of problems in the certifying body. I'll just leave it that way. Um, and I work globally online as a coach and counselor. And I do still see clients healing from sex and pornography and relationship addiction, along with OEA healing work. So, OEA, Organized Extreme Abuse, is my shorthand. With my colleague, Deb Wonderly, we hold a consultation group for therapists and other helping professionals who treat OEA survivors. They definitely need support and protection as they're trying to offer care. So that's my kind of official sounding bio, I guess. And it also is important for me to talk about how I met the two of you. I know I didn't put that in the script, but I know whenever people watch interviews, and these days there's a lot of people talking about who to trust. And I think that's super important because there's a whole new wave of influencers out there who are coming out. And, what I know about the satanic agenda is that they have kind of the players that come out that eventually are debunked because they're so obvious. But then there's ones that there's sort of a false light agenda that look really good on paper, but they're basically lying and deceiving and trying to suck up energy and divert people. And so I know we're not naming names on here, but I hope all the viewers are really curious about that, about me, about anybody. And so I just wanted to say that, I first met Goel because I saw his work online and I read an article or two, and I was absolutely shocked in a fantastic way that there was any human on the planet that was writing about the Church of Satan so openly and so blatantly. And I'm a survivor of satanic ritual abuse, trauma-based mind control, MK Ultra, government sponsored, which I'll talk about more. But in my experience, no one was talking about it like that. And so I started avidly following what was going on in Utah. And that's how I saw some of the legal things that were being challenged in the legislature with Cindy Metcalf and Relentless Hope, looking to kind of leverage her position as an executive from with an organization who had heard stories from survivors and carry that into the legal field and actually be believed and taken seriously. So I'm really, really grateful for the work that you are doing. And Sherry, how I met you is I'm trying to think exactly when I first came across your work. It was definitely it was at the Relentless Hope seminar, where you shared your story and I got to hear you. And again, I was floored because I realized not only are they talking about what I call rape trafficking, I think sex trafficking is the wrong term. Um,
Great.
but they're also talking about satanic ritual abuse or the Church of Satan's infiltration into the Mormon church and elsewhere. And then when I heard your story, I realized And they're talking about MK Ultra and trauma-based mind control. I mean, wow, that was so amazing. And to have that at a publicly available event, it was just powerful. And so I basically fell into deep admiration for you all and wanted to work with you however I could. So when this opportunity came to share my story, I said, yes, I would love to, and I would be honored. So I hope, am I leaving anything out there?
I don't know, Anastasia, but I feel same way towards you. That's why I was so excited about having you come on here because your testimony is going to be so powerful, and I haven't had the opportunity to hear it yet. So, and I too am so thankful and grateful for Goel and Cindy and Relentless Hope and the movement. I mean, they're not survivors of this, and look at what they've done, and what they're doing, and they stand up for this, and they don't back down, and that is so admirable. And so I see that same spirit in you, Anastasia, um, in your uh, the guide that I sent you to fill out. You mentioned being involved in activism, and did you want to talk about how you got involved in that, or what would you like to share from this point?
Yeah, I would be happy to. So, I've been deeply interested in the question of how someone goes from living their normal life, hearing things that may be upsetting or concerning, being curious about it, and then going back to their normal life versus bridging over into having it sink in at a level where they have to do something outside their normal life. And that happened to me. I mean, I did things around public education. So I did an early interview, or it was a talk that I posted on YouTube called Extreme Abuse 101. And that was tough. It took me like 3/4 of a year to put that together because it was triggering. So, as a survivor, to try to educate, I have to reckon with what that brings up for me around MK Ultra programming, do not tell, if you tell you'll be killed, those kinds of things. But I had a lot of support and I made a lot of progress in my other kinds of healing. And so I was able to do that. But afterward, I was exhausted. And I just thought, I'm not going to ever do anything like that again. And so I wasn't really active, and I didn't really have anyone to be active with until the pandemic hit. And right around that time, I started to have a sense that there's something global, organized, and evil about this in my experience. And then I was able to connect with other people who were feeling the same way. And I found out that a lot of the same people who could see through the digital ID plan, basically the isolation, the kinds of policies that would isolate and divide families, were the same kinds of people that were involved in the satanic agenda or the Agenda 2030, and people who knew about one knew about the other. And so I suddenly found a community where we started to go forward with activism. And so we did public marches, we did rallies, and we saw some pretty significant progress, it felt like, for us at the time. And so that, and combined with some of what Ali Carter was doing, who was talking about surviving the deep underground military base related to the Los Angeles area, really inspired me. And Ali, if you know, was putting together on her website rallies all over America. And so I thought, this is how we're going to change this. We're going to get people on every street corner in the entire, every state. And so what happened is that right before some of those rallies, right before the rallies are supposed to take place, they got canceled, all of them. And it said on our website, they're all canceled, it's too dangerous. And so I felt like I was inspired by her work, but, and I wasn't sure the exact timing of when they're canceled. I can't quite remember, but I just thought, okay, I need to do one of these that doesn't get canceled. And so that's how I created the March for Innocence in 2022 in Seattle, Washington. And we had a lot of the same freedom people there, and we dressed in white, we wore white balloons, and it was really exciting. We had a couple survivors there, Mary Knight and Lynn Crook. They had just both published books, one on her own story of surviving sex trafficking, Mary Knight, and Lynn Crook about being someone who successfully sued I think her father for incest, rape. And it was really amazing to be with some of these pioneers out there and really showcase them and their bravery. And interestingly, about Lynn Crook's case, the court delayed the judgment of the case for 2 years. And when I read her book and heard her story, it really looked like they delayed the judgment so they could create the false memory foundation, so they could create the counter argument in the media and in the public before the judgment. So this thing is so big, and we'll talk about that more. But anyway, so in 2023, I had a second March for Innocence in Seattle, and that one was much tougher than the first one, because we had two speakers lined up, and one of our speakers was a retired criminal justice professional and politician, Neil McClanahan. And I'd met with Neil. I had detailed notes about what he planned to share. And in fact, he later told me he'd been in touch with a documentary film crew who were coming down from Canada to make a film about a case in Washington state called the Paul Ingram case. And that case was a successfully prosecuted ritual abuse case, although SRA, satanic ritual abuse, was not on the books against the law in Washington. So it was prosecuted under child rape laws. But it was a very clear satanic ritual abuse case, the evidence, the network. And so he was going to come and talk to the audience about that case, but he canceled the night before. And he said he was sick, he had COVID, but he mentioned that he was scared. And I understand that because he had been pursued, he had been harassed, he had been, I mean, for years, even after the case was over. And obviously, Goel, you know what some of what that is like when you're an ally trying to do the right thing, and you just get pummeled and pummeled and pummeled. And so we didn't cancel the march, but I really felt that second time why people don't do these marches. It's like it's terrifying. Um, and, you know, with recent events in Utah, I know that that's been scary for people. What if there's violence? If we try to stand up for children, if we try to stand up for what we believe. However, also, the way I look at it is we're going to live for some amount of time and then we're going to die. And how are we going to live? To me, that is so much more important than anything else. And that's what I've realized is because of the grace that I've been given to be someone who survived this experience, there's much that my God is asking of me in terms of standing up and speaking up with whatever power I have. And so I chose to, in 2024, we had the March for Innocence in Sedona, Arizona, where I was living at the time, because I had met a journalist there that could help me. And this year it's being held in Provo, Utah, because of the work that you're doing there. And I just want to really honor the movement of the local survivors and the allies in the Utah area, and B, it's exhausting to put on an event like this, so I needed help. And so I asked, is anybody willing to help? And people said yes. And that's what I love about the Utah community. It's very tight knit, the survivors and allies. I mean, every community has its character and its evolution, but I'm very hopeful that we can have a successful event. And success just means we have it. Like, it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter how many people come. Like, sure, I'd like to have lots of people to stand for children, but what matters is that we give the community the opportunity. So thanks for letting me share all of that, because it's been quite a journey to have this fourth annual March for Innocence. And I really want to encourage people to come. It's 5:30 p.m. Monday night, October 20th at Pioneer Park, which is next to the Provo Police Department. And at that event, we have it on that day because there was a march in 1996 that took place in Brussels, Belgium. And that was called the Marche Blanche, with just French for Innocence March, basically white march, white for innocence. And at that march, they reported 300 to 350,000 people that took to the streets.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was
Wow.
before the widespread internet, or certainly before social media, right? It was just the
Mhm.
human consciousness said, go, and people went. And that's what I want to see in
Applaud.
my future.
I just can't hold back. I applaud your efforts,
Oh,
your determination, your boldness. You have a sweet spirit about you, but you are so like on fire inside of you. And I love that. And I love what's going on in Utah. I love the collective strength that there is and the movement. And I just got back from the Netherlands, and I just got to say this, the darkness over there is so oppressive. I had to leave and come back.
oh,
And I literally was having like physical stuff going on and lots of emotional stuff. And I can also relate to what you said about hitting up against programming and, like things being canceled and people getting scared. And, but I want to applaud you and the fact that you don't stop and you keep going. And thank you, Goel, too, for what you're doing and that you don't stop and you don't back down. And I love that about Relentless Hope. And that's a perfect name, Relentless. I love that. And there is hope and there is a movement, and I believe that God is behind it. And that's why I come to Utah and fight and stand when I can. And it's big and it's spreading throughout the world. And yes, there's an evil agenda and there's a lot going on, but we have a God that's greater, and greater is he that is within us than he that's in the world. So I don't want to get off to your story because that's why you're here.
okay.
But I did want to interject that because I see it and I feel it. And it's so good to be here just in getting back to my schedule and my life. Um, because I needed to feel this again. I needed to get back into what God has called me to do. And that was to be a voice for the voiceless and speak up for those who couldn't yet speak up for themselves. And it's like I'm being um, and this isn't about me, but I'm being put into this activism role too, and it's exciting to be here with you at this moment in time for such a time as this, which we were just studying last night in Esther. So
Mm.
it's like so cool, the timing, and I'm excited. Thank you, God, that you're giving me this opportunity because I feel like this is an opportunity for you to rise and shine because that's what God has called us to do. And that's the name of my website, ariseandShineAfterAbuse.com. So back over to you, Anastasia. I don't know where you want to go from here. You just talk and we will listen.
Okay. Well, I want to speak about how absolutely wild it is that we could possibly feel excited when we're supposed to be cowering in fear. We're supposed to be crushed. And this is the power of people coming together with shared intent. And for me, I say a prayer every day, not just one, but for grounding and connection and protection. And I say that for this event as well. May we all be grounded, every single person who shows up, that they be connected to their hearts, to their spirits, and that we may all be protected by the God that is of all, of love. And so that is my hope. That's my intent. And I do feel that the spirit of Neil, who did pass away not too long after the event of cancer, is with this. You know, we have an award ceremony that we do at the March for Innocence, and that's in part in honor of him and all the work he did as an ally and criminal justice professional. I feel like good people who are out there can inspire all of us to rise above and also just know our limits, because he was sick. And so if people are sick, they can stay home. It's okay. You know, there's going to be somebody else that can step in. Or it's smaller this year and it's bigger next year. People do have to take care of ourselves. And at the same time, it is really amazing. You know, when I went to Utah for the first time in my life, I went there in March of this past year. And it was really a spiritual calling, but also my friend Rachel had sent me a flyer online connected to something that Goel was a part of, that Cindy was a part of. And And I was supposed to be headed north on my van trip. I was on a year-long van journey that I've written a blog about called Caravan. And my spirit said, go to this event. And it was really, it felt like a once in a lifetime opportunity. And I remember because they were holding a vigil and also a protest at the same time. And I don't know, Goel, if how much you want to talk or if you want to talk any more about that, but I feel like you were one of the spearhead organizers and you spoke there and I was in the audience and I had heard in advance that they were going to invite survivors to come to the front for a tribute. And I thought, oh no, I'm not going up there. Like, I'm not going here as a survivor. I'm going as a journalist anyway. I'm just going to take pictures and see what they do. And, I felt scared. So again, I could relate to that. But when I think it was Jason Preston from We Are the People Utah called any survivors who want to come to the front, or I'm not sure who, it might have been Alexia who was speaking. And I just found myself floating up there. Just like I'm going. I just floated like I was on a cloud. And I went up there and people were crying. And I was standing next to Asia Raid. I think we were holding hands. And there was a couple other survivors that I hadn't met yet. And it was just so beautiful. They played this song, Rescue. And I still listen to that song and look at the pictures from that march. I still remember what it was like to look out and see. I don't know how many people were there. Was it 100? Like, I'm not great at
There's a
estimating.
few hundred.
A few
There's,
hundred people. And
yeah.
they clapped for us. They believed in satanic ritual abuse. Like they understood what it was. They had a sense of honor of how difficult it would have been to survive that. And they just held the space while we cried and laughed and just got to be believed for like a really first, first anyway, I could just go on and on, but that event changed my life because we'd never had that many people at the marches. I always thought it'd be great if we could, but what does it mean when a bunch of people get together and say, we know about this, we know that it's real, we care about this, we care about children, we're willing to take a stand? That's the humanity I want to be a part of. And when I if I, if I don't see that, I can go into despair that, people are just carrying on business as usual. They don't care. Like, I don't want to get stuck in there, but, it is challenging to be a survivor of this stuff. There is the process of chronic grief. I mean, that's just a fact of my life. I'm getting memories back still. And so I can veer into a little bit more of my story, but I do just want to, I'm glad to come out of the gate just talking about gratitude and activism and, honoring the people that are making it possible for us to even talk about this. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes. The activism part usually comes later. And it's a big part of healing. It has been for me. And I know you mentioned that it has been for you in your interview guide that you filled out. And thank you for filling all that out.
Yeah, it was
Um,
clarifying.
yeah, it was amazing to read all that you sent me. And um I don't know if this is a good point to do this or not, but if you want to start talking about your early childhood or anything that you want to share with the listeners about the abuse, so we don't miss that, because I know we are, and you and I are both grateful and thankful, and every day we can be that way and live that way, but I don't want to like just go from that, and then I'm not letting you get into your story. So um please share whatever you feel like you want to share.
Okay. So this is trigger warning. I'm going to be graphic and I'm going to do that to help people understand some of what I went through. And perhaps others who hear the story might not feel so alone. They might have an easier time with their own journey. Um, but if anyone feels overwhelmed, please push pause or stop. So this is what I believe I know. I've done a lot of different ways of trying to comprehend. And the simplest way of saying, how does she know that? Because sometimes I get comments on that when I tell my story. How do you know all that? Or how do you know that's true? Is the more that I metabolize this story and I believe myself, and I do vet my own memories, I don't just believe every single thing that comes to mind. But the healthier I get, the healthier I get. And I think that comes from integrity, from integration. So I will leave it to the viewer to decide for yourself what seems credible and true. And this is what I know, some of what I know about my story. So I was bred into a family of multi-generational survivors of military sponsored trauma-based mind control, satanic ritual abuse. And my family was on the Pacific Northwest coast of the American continent. So Vancouver, Seattle, Portland area. We were involved in pornography, rape trafficking, including kill pornography, um, military sponsored creation of mentoring candidate, basically, which is what they were intending for me. Um, it was,
So
go ahead.
explain that, like creation of mentoring candidate. What does that term mean exactly?
Well, if you've seen the movie Mentoring Candidate, it's an example of someone who has they've had things done to their psyche to make them like a puppet. Things that they may not remember that they have done. So the use of deliberate torture and various methods to basically shock a child out of their body, shock a child into split consciousnesses, and then shock a child so that part of their consciousness, kind of the old multiple personality diagnosis or disorder, doesn't know what the other part of the consciousness is doing. And so that was used in the Manchurian Candidate to get someone to do things as a spy or an agent of the state as opposed to an agent of their own free will.
Yeah. So for the viewer out there that is skeptical about this, the reality of it is our government did attempt to do this through the programs and the various sub-projects of MK Ultra. That is just documented fact that that was what they were attempting to do. They were attempting through those sub-projects to create parts of the human consciousness by splintering the human consciousness. And those parts would not necessarily be aware of what their other parts were doing. In the case of, there's a Canadian psychologist, Ewan Cameron, I believe his name is,
Mm-hmm.
and he operated out of Canada, and he called it psychic driving. And if you want to Google Ewan Cameron, if you want to Google psychic driving, it's extremely graphic. It's appalling that a psychiatric or psychological or medical professional of any sort would be involved in that kind of experimentation on any human being. It speaks to a lack of not just individual ethics as a medical professional, but a lack of institutional control over the medical professionals because he was a university professor, I believe, at the time that he was conducting these experiments. And it gets into questions of consent on the part of the subjects that he experimented on, whether or not they understood the full implications of what he was doing. The same thing with Dr. Sidney Gottlieb down in the United States and those who worked under him. The reality of it is that these men were in fact administering drugs and conducting psychological experiments on people without their consent. And even the people that they had partial consent from, they were doing this without their informed consent, meaning they did not fully disclose the risk involved or the implications of the research. They certainly did not disclose the purpose of that research. And if they had, I doubt that they would have had many willing participants in it. Um, what you see in the aftermath of it is an explosion of social instability in this country from the 60s onward. And you see the emergence of like serial killer and sexual sadists as a phenomenon that was increasingly frequent. Whether you believe that it came from a government mind control program or not, something clearly went awry in the 1960s in the United States. something was clearly going awry beginning in the 1950s with the Korean War and returning Army veterans from that war. Uh, so the United States government violated virtually every individual liberty that is guaranteed to us under the Bill of Rights. They transgressed every limitation on their power imaginable because federal government has enumerated or limited powers for a reason. And that is to prevent them from abusing those powers or from going beyond those limits to do things like this to the very people whose liberties they are supposed to secure. Like, who will watch the lawgivers? And the issue is, it's a fundamental breakdown in the checks and balances of our government that any of this ever occurred. And so, without detracting from Anastasia's narrative, the reality of it is there is a historical basis. They were at least attempting to do this. That's historical fact. And it speaks volumes as to the character of the people who were involved that they would even conceive of attempting to do this, that they would even try it. And we know for a fact, because they admitted it in congressional hearings, that this also extended to children. And under the law, children cannot consent. And the children that they
Right.
targeted were orphans. By some reports that I've seen, over 3,000 orphans were targeted in these programs and subjected to this kind of experimentation. There is no justification for it. There is no why. There is no basis for it that's rational. That's the thing that I want to stress. What was done to Stacy and what was done to all of these others, like Sherry, there is no basis for it. You can wrap it up in national security all you want. It's still an egregious, abominable course of conduct. And the government did not have any legal or moral basis for doing what they were attempting to do, whether you believe that they were successful or not. There was no grounds for this. And that's something that I want to stress here because I think it's often lost in the discussion because people have a lurid fascination with the more graphic details. The idea of mind control, the idea of um, being able to impact someone in such a way as to create dissociative identity disorder in them, or alters or parts. That's not what you should be focused on.
Mm-hmm.
What you should be focused on is that the people who are doing this are doing it without the consent of the people that they're doing it to. And that automatically, even attempting something this egregious, the person is a victim of something horrific. And if you're a decent human being, that's the impression that you get. Uh, That's before you even reach the part that involves systemic abuse, including sexual abuse, physical abuse, mental abuse, which rises to the level of torture. Before you even get into that, the fact that you would conceive of manipulating another person's psyche in order to fracture it, you just do not belong in any civilized society or culture. And that's the line that we have to draw. We all agree that rape is wrong. We all agree that physically abusing a child is wrong to whatever ends. It's just wrong. And it's something that you cannot permit if you're going to live in a decent community. And most of us watching this just want to live in a decent community. We want to know that our children can ride their bikes and be safe. We want to know that our neighbors are not sex offenders. These are not unreasonable requests. And so with Anastasia, when she gets into the graphic details of this, many of you will likely focus on those lurid details, those things that involve government experiments and secret rooms. And we've all seen the portrayals in television and movies. But what you really need to focus on is Was Anastasia capable of consenting to this as a child? And even if she were, did she understand the full implications of this? Did any of the adults who were subjected to this kind of behavior understand what they were getting into? There's no basis for it. There's no
No,
excuse
there's
for it.
not.
Like, so don't focus on the lurid details. Focus on the moral and legal implications of this. Focus on the fact that it isn't something you would want happening in your backyard, and then consider the fact that it is happening in your backyard even today.
Well, I want to thank you for honoring Anastasia, um, because she's way more than just her details of the graphic details of what happened to her, and for interjecting those facts about the Manchurian candidate and psychic driving and all that, so that people can understand this in a greater way. But it's terrible that these things happen to children, the child that you were, Anastasia, and the child that I was, and so many. I think that the longer the time period that has gone by, that it continued from the 50s and 60s. It's like they got away with it, so then they just found better ways of hiding it all.
That's right.
And so it's wonderful that you're here to break that silence, break that hidden agenda, because you have a voice and you can tell, um, without the backlash, that there was, and the satanic panic shut down, and just all of that. So I don't know where you would like to start back with your story, but um, anything that you want to share from your early childhood.
Sure. Yeah, I want to say thank you, Goel, for what you said. I really feel Neil McClanahan's voice here too, as the legal criminal justice. Like, this is not okay. We need to look at this as a society. I really feel that very strong protector presence. It's wonderful. It's
It
wonderful.
is wonderful.
And, Sherry, as well, you mentioned the generations. I do think it is so heartbreaking that we have people from the 50s, and then we have people from the 60s, and then I'm in the generation of the 70s, and it did not stop. They said, oh, okay, we did these radiation experiments, we're all done now. And no, MK Ultra, and it just morphs and morphs and morphs and morphs. And I was a generation that I saw some of the brutal physical torture that I went through with, basically being strapped to a chair, being electroshocked, being, poked with needles, being injected. I have a whole list. In fact, I plan to read this list, and I want to, not to encourage people to focus on the lurid details at the expense of the consideration of justice, but to help them more deeply consider justice for this kind of torture to children. So these are the kinds of things that I went through as part of my trauma-based mind control. But I did see that these techniques did start to shift somewhat, because I work with survivors now who are of younger generations than myself, and they had a certain tech that started to come in, and the frequency and like the sonic weaponry that was shifting their consciousness in different ways, so which to this day we're seeing. So anyway, this is a list of, I call it super slave memories, and I just kept it as a way of honoring my own resilience when I would feel this horrible shame and thinking I was the worst person in the world, because so much of satanic abuse is scapegoating all of the abuser guilt and shame onto the victim. I have memories implicit. I wasn't conscious like I am now, but I do believe that I was in the womb and my mom was tortured with some kind of a radiation. Um, I was taken to the edge of death repeatedly. Electroshock was a huge part of what I went through, solitary confinement and deprivation. So I was taken to the deep underground in Washington State, Eastern Washington, in the Yakima area. It was an Army base. It's still there. In terms of the above ground, it's a training center, but below ground, I believe there is a massive facility structure. where children were taken when I was little. And unfortunately, I believe it is still active. Um, these are very difficult for non-survivors to comprehend, that there can be an entire civilization underneath the ground, deep underground secret bases, torture chambers, and even something as large as stadiums. I'm not the only person to talk about memories like this. If you look in the work of Donald Marshall, he has talked about the underground as well, and several others have. Allie Carter did. That's why I was attracted to her work, talking about tunnels, magnetic trains. And, part of what just is so difficult for me is that these things can be researched. We can find people who have engineering backgrounds that can research these things. A former therapist that I used to have did work with a team of people in the McMartin preschool incident, and they did hire people to go dig, and they did find valid evidence, not of an underground military base, but of underground where they were harming children. So it does, some days it's hard to live with the fact that we haven't had enough people just do research on these places. But when I was down there, I went through overstimulation, rape of all kinds, including by animals, which is something I'm processing in my life right now. Just this, memories come up. I remember being a perpetrator would have this pinch thing, and they would pinch my lip like that. So there was something sharp on the finger of holding my lip, and I would be raped by a series of 3 dogs. And I had to hold completely still, or my lip would be ripped off like that. This is a memory that I'm processing right now. It's just like, ugh, and it just, they come when they come. Like, I was about to get a dog, and I think part of that association, is just coming up for processing before I do that, so I can fully release, any negative associations. Um, but black magic, absolutely grooming into Wiccan black magic happened somewhat when I was later. I was placed inside of a dead animal, which is part of the satanic ritual. I was poisoned, force fed, and force drank. Some of the programming is called Alice in Wonderland programming, which, Alice goes and she's eat me and drink me. She has these things that she finds, and they reinforce that so that a part of my brain feels like I have to constantly eat in order. Anytime I'm nervous, anytime I remember, anytime I speak out, eat, eat, eat. Um, Burning with cold. There's a lot of ways of torturing kids without marks. Temperature manipulation. So you don't actually kill someone, but you get them super cold. You don't actually burn them, but you get them super hot. You go back, forth, back, forth. Lack of food. Something I call bug torture, which was being covered with some kind of sticky substance and put in a bug tank. Spinning was a huge one, just spinning on a flat surface so that my mind could not track. I got dizzy, and then later instilling vertigo, like because those memories are cued to come back in. Someone feels like they have vertigo, but actually they're having potentially the blending of old memories of being spun against their will. Being covered with slime and smelly things, poop, semen, that's a big part of it. Being in the dark, bad smells, rotting food, just basically desecration. How do you desecrate a child and make her feel just horrible? Drugs for sleepiness, too much excitement, sexual enhancement, enraged, trippy and high. Muscles clench, certain drugs to make muscles clench, which is really terrifying. Tearing off of nails, and toenails, or poking under them, near drownings. And again, people hearing this are like, no, this one person couldn't have gone through that much. Like, there's no way. Like, I totally get that denial. And I have no idea why I'm still alive. So many kids die from this torture. It's really so heartbreaking. And for some reason, I didn't. So I'm here, and you didn't, and you're here. So again, we can just simply say, I guess it was a miracle. Some days it didn't feel like a miracle. Some days I felt the kids that died were the lucky ones. Um, but the psychic driving, the being forced to listen to something over and over while on medication or drugs, having an echo, echo, echo. So if I would say something, it would echo back at me in my ears. Forced listening to this droning voice, wah, wah, or very critical voices. You are fat, you are ugly, and just that kind of automated hatred. Um, so, yeah, I'm going to stop there and just take a breath and say, if you have listened to all that, then you're very strong and resilient just to hear it all, that such a thing could be possible. I feel a little hot going through all that. There's a lot of energy but I've done a lot of work in trauma therapy and massage and, for myself sitting with the divine, my God, and just having people do hands-on healing with me. And so I'm not new to all of these things. I got into therapy when I was in 20 was the first group therapy I ever went to, and I'm 55 now. And I've pretty much just been working on it nonstop ever since. So I'll just stop there and see if you have any comments, or maybe we just need a little break.
Well, you're taking a break, Anastasia, and I'm glad that you're doing that because we do, as survivors and overcomers, we need to get our body responses back down so that all of the emotions that come up after sharing all of that can, you know, everything can regulate. And that's so important to take that time to do that. I just want to say to the listeners to validate Anastasia's experience. Um, these things cannot be made up, and our bodies remember. And if nothing else, our body validates and affirms every single thing that we remember when we do have these memories. And I myself just made a list of what my body went through this week. And so, as Anastasia, thank you for sharing all that. As she was sharing that, I was just like, wow, what validation to hear the list that Anastasia shared. And I'm planning on sharing my list on my YouTube channel sometime soon. But our bodies have memories, even if we can't connect the emotions to it or the actual memory of it. And that for every survivor that's listening, I want to validate your experience because it's done to your body, it's done to suppress your emotions, it's done to disconnect you from your own thoughts, your own emotions, your own body, and your own free will. And this never should have happened to Anastasia or myself or any survivor out there. And constantly, I always have to give this to God. I think of the children that are in it current day. And that's something that, and I just want to mention Rebecca and Skylar, who are caught in this and are trying to get out right now. And this is why we do this. It's because of what was given to me, what was given to Anastasia. And I'm so thankful that Goel is here with us today and that it worked out this way because here's this protector guy that's standing up for this and believes us and talks about it and doesn't back down. So I just want to thank you again, Goel. And whenever you feel ready, and if you're not ready yet, maybe Goel can interject something here, but whenever you feel ready, Anastasia.
Goel, do you have anything you want to share?
No, nothing. That can't wait.
Okay. I feel ready. This past year when I bought a camper van. So hearing that people have said, I mean, I've never read that whole list before. I've posted it online, but when I've shared other things, people say, well, who did this? And, you know, how did you call the police? Kind of stuff like that. And So it was an underground military compound. I was there most of age 4 to 6. And so there was a series of recurrent experiments, and many of those were about the experiences I just stated. Not all were bad. There was a lot of forced sexual pleasure, which was the conditioning for the kind of direction that my case took. But and then there was rewards if I didn't torture. When I was 5 years old, I was given a 4-year-old girl in my cell, and I was told she was my slave, and I would be rewarded if I harmed her. And we were harmed together. And I wrote some about this on my online caravan blog. If people want to hear more detail about my story, I'm working on a memoir called Temporarily Evil. And I'm trying to find a way to speak about, Goel, you mentioned the age of consent. I did things that I carried shame for all my life, and I felt like I was an adult when I did them, even though I was 6 years old. Um, and that's part of the programming is it's all your fault. But sometimes the development gets stuck in childhood places, and then the body grows up, but the brain is like a child. And it's very confusing, but it is our task as adults to find a way to sift through this and find actual justice to protect children. And so some of that I hope to be a part of in whatever way I can by talking about my story. And also my family, they thought, I think they were tricked into thinking that this was, your child was serving the military and serving the country. The true spirit of America has been hijacked. Like America and even the true spirit of the American military, they're not evil. The true spirit of America is good, and true military, they stand up for goodness. They protect children and women and all people. That's who the real military. So this was a covert. These were cowards. They were hiding underground like rats, and they took children because they were cowards and they couldn't do something truly empowered as a true adult man would do. So that's who did this. The army, it's not all the people there, but when I was a child, it was everyone who was running everything. And so for the whole rest of my life, I felt like it was the whole world. How could I go to the police? The police were involved. How could I, it just never felt like there was anyone who could do anything. And so as I got older, I was involved in the child rape media industry. I was taken repeatedly to a dungeon. I was shackled with my right arm and used in rape trafficking in a place that there was a bed and a camera, and people would come in, men would come in and do various sexual acts of rape to me. Um, in reading that whole list of tortures that I went through, there's a lot of tortures they can do, as I mentioned, that don't leave any mark. So people say, well, did that really happen? But at one point, I actually had the opportunity to talk with someone who had very clear memories of having been a cult torturer and programmer. In other words, someone who shackled the kids and did things to them. And one of the things that this person said to me was, you can see if you've been a victim of adrenochrome bloodletting, adrenochrome being the blood that is adrenalized typically by terror and is taken from children like vampires, because it contains substances that are very healing, or prolong life, this idea of the vampire eternal life through the blood of children. And so he said, I'll show you where you can look to see if you have adrenochrome scars. And so he did. And I looked, and sure enough, I had them. And what was interesting is I was there with another friend of mine who was a survivor.
Were they on the inside of your arm?
So it basically,
Like in the,
it's like an extra fold. It's kind of hard to see, but it's like an extra fold right there. And people would go, oh, that's just the flap of, a little bit of extra fat or whatever. But a good friend of mine who was also a survivor of this had the exact same scar. We both did, and our other friend didn't. It's on both sides. Um, and, I have to say, I have no actual memory of being cut there and having blood come out. So I could say, well, I don't know. But then he also told us about this other kind of a scar, which relates to shark hooks. And again, I don't know if there's enough, if you can see like a white,
Hmm.
um, there's a white scar there, and there's another one there. Yeah.
Same thing.
And that's where they hook into the skin and hang kids from their skin. And I have them at the various creases in my body. I have them on my shoulders. Like once we knew what to look, it clicked this whole thing in place, which was so horrible, but at the same time so validating. And so that was a person who was forced as a child to do horrible things and then using their information to try to help me heal, which was a pretty extraordinary experience. This person was forced to do that when they were underage. And um, so, I'm going to just stop for a minute and just say if I had been watching this, I probably would have pulled up my shirt and started looking. I probably would have gone into the mirror and looked for like little white, dots, just like you showed me. So there might be some people right now who are having an experience of validation, shock, sadness, fear, terror, so I just want to honor the grief that coming out of denial can bring. And at the same time, if we can't know, it's really hard to heal. If we can't know the extreme nature sometimes of the torture, then we just feel like we're crazy and we just can never quite get it together. Just not quite functional. I don't know. I just can't really adult very well. I have so many mood swings. I don't know why. It's like, actually, no, you're not crazy. You're a torture survivor. And if you've gone through that, you're going to have extreme emotions as your body and your mind and your nervous system tries to work out what happened to you. And if we can kind of catch these people in a nest of like love and understanding, then they can have a place to go and say, oh, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. I was having a normal reaction to a horrible intrusion in my body. So I just want to honor that and thank you for what you shared already. And yeah, just want to stop here and pause and
Yeah, you're about to give these people that nest, as I understand it. You've got some land and a facility that you're about to convert into a retreat.
yes, that's true. So we are opening in Mount Shasta, California, an outpatient, intensive outpatient treatment center for trauma-based mind control survivors, satanic ritual abuse, and it's not residential in terms of people who can come and live there long term. We may do some short-term intensives that are residential, just with one or two people at a time. But definitely, if people can get there into the area, then and they have a place to stay that's safe for them, coming for support, coming for group treatment, coming for individual treatment. We have trauma-informed yin yoga class. So yin is basically a very, 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 very gentle form of yoga. It's like basically like just put your hand on your arm and breathe, just things that will help people get in their body. And there's like tissue everywhere. Like, yes, you can cry here during this yoga. Like, so we're trying to find things that will help people to gently have places to go and feel understood and held and that they're not so alone. And yeah, I've been looking for over a year for a place and we're starting small. It's not a huge facility or anything. And we have to be really careful who comes there for safety reasons. But it's so important to me that there are 3D places for people to go because all the services are online and they have been since 2023. But when you start dealing with this kind of memory work, it's like, okay, see ya. It's just people, oh, they're stuck alone potentially. And it's so overwhelming. So it's not that it's not helpful, it is. And thanks for bringing that up because we're super excited about that.
Yeah, I mean, the importance of a 3D facility is it can't be understated. I mean, one of the issues is getting survivors to actually commit
Mm.
to even short-term residential care,
Yeah.
let alone we at Relentless Hope. I am familiar with my wife's efforts to get placements for survivor after survivor after survivor. That's one of the most difficult things, not getting the placement, but getting the survivor to feel as though they would be safe going into treatment, going into a residential placement, because so much of what survivors go through is related to asserting a sense of control and autonomy over their lives. And part of that can be the self destructive reaction against a residential placement, where it's 360 degrees. It's your medical, it's your room and board, it's the therapy services that you need, all with an eye towards integrating you back into society as a functioning adult who has overcome the trauma and everything. And what you said earlier about these individuals, what happens to them when they recover a memory, the kind of paralysis that it generates in terms of their professional life, their personal life, because suddenly you're realizing that people very close to you were part of your abuse, people that you trusted, people that you believed in. And it all occurs in the context of the backdrop of the community that you grew up in, whether that be religious or geographical. And so it really upends your life from what I witnessed. I've interviewed in the current case that I'm focused on, the David Lee Amley case, I've interviewed like 322 people. And all of them, some of them didn't recover their memory. Some of them were very aware of what happened to them. Some of them did try to report it as children. They did go to teachers and principals and bishops in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They did attempt to report it, and no one helped them. And so when the people watching this who are outside of this see this, one of the things I want you to understand is a lot of victims of this type of abuse do try to report, and they are obstructed at every turn.
Yeah.
They, the reality of it is we need a legal process that is mandated, that the minute, and to some extent, we already have it. We have people who are mandated reporters. Are they following the mandate? No. Based on what I've seen, it's not just the legal obligation that's an issue or the lack thereof. It is the fact that we have no enforcement.
That's right.
Failure to report when you're a mandatory reporter should be a felony. You should be treated as an accessory to the abuse if it's substantiated at a later date because you are an accessory. You know, one of the more heartbreaking stories is every Latter-day Saint child gets baptized around their 8th birthday. It's a big deal. And I am aware of multiple Latter-day Saint children who, in the interview with their bishop leading up to that baptism, disclosed that they did not feel worthy of being baptized because they had been sexually abused and they felt that they were somehow responsible. And it was like, not only did the bishop fail to tell them, how could you be responsible? You're an 8-year old. You're 8. You're not responsible for what these adults or what these older teenagers have done to you. Like systemically, I will deal with this. In the context of that church, which I used to be a part of, we have a very bright line rule. It's called the law of chastity, and it explicitly states that the only form of sexual conduct that is acceptable before God is sexual context in the context of sexual conduct in the context of legal marriage between a biological male and a biological female who are adults, because that's the only way the marriage can be legally recognized. And so any conduct that occurs outside of that, that's sexual in nature, is grounds for disfellowship and excommunication. And yet, I know for a fact that the church does not enforce its own rules, which goes back to what I said, both at the civic level, in terms of our government agencies, and at the ecclesiastical level, in terms of our churches. They simply aren't enforcing the rules that they already have. And people are being victimized and abused as a result of it. In Romans, it says rulers are a terror to good or to bad works, not a terror to evil works, not to good works. And I think in our society, we have become so unmoored from that principle that we now see that rulers have become a terror to good works, that those who do try to report and those who do try to advocate, they're the ones that are punished, and the people who are raping children and abusing adults, exploiting adults who were victims of this in their childhood, they're the ones who are protected. They're the ones who are sent for treatment and counseling. And the child and their parents, their family, are left to deal with it by themselves. I know of thousands of perpetrators who were sent to LDS or social services. They were giving counseling funded by the church free of charge because the church believed that they could rehabilitate pedophiles. They didn't have any empirical basis for believing that or attempting to do it or squandering church resources on it, but they did. And they did not offer the same level of care to the victims of those perpetrators. They didn't offer them pre counseling. They didn't send them to social services and whatnot. And the message that those survivors received was loud and clear. Even at 6, 7, 8 years of age, you're the one who's responsible for this. On some level, you invited it. That is an abominable message to send to a child who's been sexually abused or exploited. And it paves the way for them to believe that their future abusers, when they do get into romantic relationships as adults, when they do get in a marriage and they marry someone who's abusive more often than not, that it's their fault because that's what they were conditioned from the time of their first disclosure on to believe, is that they put themselves in certain situations, they wore certain clothing, they entertained a certain dynamic, they were the problem, or at least part of the problem. What I want to say to everyone out there is, you know who's responsible for child rape? The rapist.
It's
It's that
right.
simple. The rapist. That's
It
who's
is that
responsible for
simple.
child rapist. Um, that's who's responsible for child rape. That's who's responsible for adult rape and all rapes in between. You cannot put your hands on somebody else without consent. And they are free to withdraw that consent at any time. So, what I want to say to you is, there's no context in which, after someone says no, that this is ever okay. And even if they don't say no, if they manifest the revocation of consent through other means, and we all know what those are, we all know when someone is not a willing participant in an intimate act, when they're not enthused about it, they're not enjoying it, and you keep going, that makes you a predator. It's unacceptable, the cultural standard that we have around sexual intercourse in this country and in this world, all the ways in which we negotiate consent and we bifurcate it. At the end of the day, stop. When someone says no explicitly, you don't have any excuse. Even when they don't say no, and you can tell from their body language and how they are behaving that they aren't enjoying the act, that they're not really wanting to go through with it. Stop. Be a decent human being. It's just that simple. It costs you nothing to be kind. It costs the people who are recipients of your cruelty everything, especially in this context. I have, as I said earlier, I've talked to 322 people just in this one case. Over the course of my life, I've talked to thousands of people. And the number of people who had their first sexual experience in a rape or a sexual assault is staggering to me. Just the sheer number of people. And I know that those are just among the 22% of people who report. Okay, there are far more who just keep quiet about it. And what I would say to you is the reason they keep quiet about it is because they see what happens to people who disclose. They see what happens to them, how they're mocked, how they're questioned, how they're ridiculed, even if they come forward with corroborating evidence. They see what happens to them and they say, why would I put myself in that position? I'll just suffer it in silence. That is unacceptable in a decent society. It is not just a matter of giving survivors enforcement. It is a matter of giving them the tools to deal with the consequences of a perpetrator's decision to abuse them. One of the reasons I left the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is that it is a $300 billion corporation. It has over $250 billion in resources and assets at its disposal. And yet, to my knowledge, it is not expending those resources to help survivors.
Sure.
It's not throwing that money at solutions for survivors or at developing a program that will help survivors reintegrate and have as normal a life as possible. Perhaps they will never have a completely normal life because their first sexual experience was violent and sadistic and cruel. And so a fundamental part of the human experience has been forever colored by that. But they could have a far more decent life than many of them have. And it behooves you as an institution that professes Christ to have that purpose and that drive towards that end. I challenge you to find a single instance in the gospel where Jesus Christ turned someone away for healing. It isn't there. It isn't
Sad.
there. And for all of these institutions that profess Christ, that claim to be exemplars of Christ and God, and they lay claim to the nomenclature of Christianity. If you aren't devoting your resources to healing people, what are you even doing? No one cares that you built another building. No one cares that you built another temple. Like at the end of the day, God is the answer to the ailments of man. He's the answer to social ills. The reason people don't do this is because they have a connection to God that informs them that every human being that they encounter is built and created in the image of their God. And therefore, what they do to another human being is what they do to God. And since they fear God, they will not cross that line. What I would say to you is the reason people have become so much more coarsened and crude and calloused is because the line between them and God has been severed. And the reason it has been severed is because of corruption within the institutional church. It is because the church does not live its professions any more than our governments enforce their laws, which is what they were established to do. Because by enforcing laws against this kind of behavior, they secure our liberties. That's the reality. How much of Anastasia's life has been lost to this? How much of Sherry's life has been lost to this? The reality of it is their entire identity stems around the fact that they survived this abuse in the first place. They'll spend the rest of their lives talking about this, not about the small, simple pleasures of life, but about how they were systematically tortured physically and sexually and mentally and spiritually by people who had no relationship or connection with God whatsoever. Because if they had, they would not act this way. And so saying that the government has to be neutral in matters of religion or morality is a lie. The government can't favor any particular religious tradition over another, but on basic morality, we are all in agreement. This is wrong. I don't know any Muslim who condones rape. I don't know any Jew that I've ever encountered who condones rape. I don't know any actual Christian that I've ever encountered that would condone rape or sexual assault because rape is a form of fornication. And it's explicitly condemned in the Pauline epistles as the one sin that takes place within the body. Every other sin is outside of the body, according to the Apostle Paul. This is a sin that's committed within the body. And so when you hear these survivors like Sherry and Anastasia sharing their experience, and they talk about things like body memories, well, guess what? The sin that was committed against them was committed within their body by
Right.
someone who did not respect their innocence as a child. This wasn't an act committed against an adult. This was an act committed against a child by a person in authority over that child. And as such, there is no why. There is no rationalization. There is no context in which any of this is their fault. What I would say to you is they both made lives for themselves. They've both made a path for themselves out of this to become productive adults, and they should be commended for doing so. Because for every Anastasia Sprout and every Sherry Burgard, um, there are 1,000 people that I'm aware of who did not make it to this level, who struggle to hold down a job in retail, to keep an apartment. And I know the church is aware of it. The church that I used to be a part of is intimately aware of it. Because one of the ways they keep it quiet is they pay for the rent of many of these victims in the Salt Lake Valley. That's the other thing that we should talk about. They pay for rent, living expenses, but connected to that is the condition that those people keep silent in order to have
Mm.
their living expenses provided for
Oh,
because they
that's
cannot
horrible.
function as
Oh my
adults.
gosh.
A
That's
muzzle.
like paying them off.
Yeah.
That's why this is quiet. I've never talked about that before,
Wow.
but I've had people within the church tell me time and time again that that's what's occurring, and there's no excuse for it.
No, that's like
Uh,
paying for their silence.
Yeah.
yes, and the reality of it is when you're someone who suffers from addiction because you self-medicate due to the trauma that you suffered as a child, when you're someone who battles depression and mental illness and dissociative identity disorder and gender identity disorder or gender dysphoria, as a result of this, because at a formative time in your life when you were developing the cognitive capacity to reason through things, someone threw your life into disarray by sexually and physically and mentally abusing you and trying to normalize that to you and trying to tell you that it was your fault. You grow up to be an adult who doesn't know your ass from your elbow, because the very people who would have taught you the difference were the ones who were raping and abusing you. There is no excuse for this. And it's not just a matter of prevention. We have a moral obligation to these people to help them as much as we can, especially the church. And the first part of this isn't just paying their basic living necessities. The first part of this is having full transparency about who abused and raped and tortured children, and in some cases, murdered children. It's not just an obligation that's incumbent on the church if you want any credibility as a government. You're going rank and file law enforcement officers who know what is going on here are going to have to start coming forward, even at the risk of their careers. And they're going to have to say, I don't want to live in a society and a culture like that. I can go do something else. You should not want a job enough to participate in this kind of behavior by your silence. I'm sorry. There is no excuse for it.
Mhm.
These people thrive on our silence, they thrive on our apathy, and they thrive on our resignation. And they have built a society to achieve those ends. That's why more than half of people won't vote in the upcoming election. Midterm elections have something like 48% voter participation. Churches, the church I used to be a part of claims 16 million members. Based on what I've seen, maybe 4 million are actually active. 4 million actually participate. And the other 12 million, you know why they don't participate? It's the same reason I left. Because they see the church not following its own rules and making exceptions for people who rape children and who abuse adults. And they're disgusted with it. The one thing we all have a finely tuned sense of is hypocrisy. Like, it's just that simple. And the good news is the amount of people who do this is small. It's larger than it should be, but it's small. And the reason it appears large is because these people pursued positions of power and authority in order to be able to get away with their abuse. They they inserted themselves into law enforcement. They inserted themselves into our mental health fields. They inserted themselves into our government and our politics. They inserted themselves into our entertainment, our arts, and our culture and our media so that they could exist in plain sight without culpability and they could abuse people with impunity. And that is what they have always done. But here's the thing, we have the means in front of us to know who those people are. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. I firmly believe that. That's what investigations of ritual abuse is designed to do. Shine sunlight on rot. It's just that simple. But to do that, you have to demand transparency. And I don't think it's an accident that over the past week or so, we shifted the narrative rather conveniently from the release of the Epstein list to the murder of Charlie Kirk. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Charlie Kirk should not be in the news right now, and what happened to him was inexcusable. But I find it really really convenient that we're talking about Jimmy Kimmel losing his job instead of talking about all of those kids that everyone on that list raped. And even if you consider yourself to be innocent, you didn't rape a kid, but you're still on that list. You owe an accounting of why you would associate with someone who never hid who he was. Jeffrey Epstein was a known quantity. I watched that clip of Cindy McCain, John McCain's wife, saying we all knew what he did. Well, if you knew, why didn't you do something? And here's the thing about that list. We already know who's on it. The victims know who's on it. We don't need the government to release it. We just need victims to talk. And the reason they won't talk is because they're worried about being sued into oblivion. Our close friends, Jason and Alexia Preston, have not even made it to the discovery phase of their defamation case filed by two alleged perpetrators. And they have already spent over $50,000. And guess what? There's been a third amended complaint filed in that case because the purpose of that case is not defamation. It's not to determine whether Jason and Alexia Preston defamed the individuals who are suing them. It is to make it punitively expensive for them to express an opinion about the issue of ritual abuse, the fact that it's real, and the fact that there are people in this state who have committed that crime. It's designed to bankrupt them for siding with victims and for giving victims a platform on which to state their case. That's what it is. That's all it is. It's a legal form of intimidation and suppression, and it has to change. If you're asking yourself why these victims don't come forward, again, look at the reception they get. Look at the risk to them, not just in terms of their health and well-being, but in terms of the financial cost. They can be sued civilly by their perpetrators. And we have a legal system that is designed to allow people to use it as a cudgel to suppress information and allegations against them. It is a two-tiered legal system with one set of rules for one group of people and another set of rules for another group of people. And that may not be what it is on paper, but it is what it is in reality. Look at
It's lawfare.
it's lawfare. And if you look at Stacy right now, she's told her story. She hasn't named one of her perpetrators. And that's by the design of this podcast. We don't want her to experience greater culpability for telling the truth than her perpetrators will face for raping and abusing her. Like that's the level right now. She can't say who did this to her. Sherry can't say who did this to her on this podcast without running the risk of facing greater civil penalties for telling the truth than their perpetrators will ever face for what they did, which includes rape and torture and murder. Think about the society you want to live in. Think about the world you want to live in. Think about the world you want your kids and grandkids to live in. I want you to get pissed off. I want you to get angry. And then I want you to channel your anger into achieving that world and saying, we're not going to cede the ground to you any more than we already have. We're going to mobilize politically. We're going to organize socially. And we're going to demand that our government represent us and represent the kind of world that we want to actually live in. That's doable because when over half of us don't vote, that means that even a significant minority of the remaining 50%, the 50% that don't vote, even if 10, 15, 20% of them come off the sidelines and vote, They could flip the results of an election. They could turn the outcome. Those are the people I'm speaking to right now. You don't vote because you feel like you're choosing between the lesser of two evils, and you are in our current system. But if you want to change that, you can. You can start by getting the lesser of two evils in office as opposed to just surrendering the ground to them. The worst option. You can mobilize and organize politically to form a third party alternative in your community and at your state level. It will take time, but it can be done. And the reality of it is, this isn't a racial issue. It isn't a gender issue. It isn't a political issue. It isn't a religious issue. It comes down to the values. Do you believe that these people are committed in the image, are created in the image of God, and therefore worthy of respect and dignity and kindness? Because if you do, I'm inviting you to join us in the coming weeks and months and years. And it will take years. It'll probably take the rest of my life and probably some of yours to change this. But it can be done, and we don't have any excuse for not doing it. If you say that you have these common values, let's focus on that common value that rape is wrong, that violating someone's bodily autonomy is wrong, that inflicting violence on a child and systemic torture is wrong. And let's not quibble about whether or not it's MK Ultra or a government program. Let's just say that something that I've said at rallies that I've written on my site, Investigations of Ritual Abuse, all sexual abuse is satanic. All
Yeah.
physical abuse is satanic. All mental abuse is satanic. There are just certain things you cannot do to another human being without doing them to God. And the kind of behaviors that have been described in this podcast by Anastasia Sprout fall into that category. And when you start looking at perpetrators in that context, that what they are doing to these children, they are doing to God Himself, whether or not it's satanic ritual abuse or just regular ritual abuse, regular abuse, if there is such a thing. It's all abuse. It's all evil. It's all satanic, and it's all inconsistent with our common values. And I am pleading with you, if you're watching this episode, to get angry about the violation of those values and the violation of just basic human decency. There's nothing special about saying that children shouldn't be sexually abused, that they shouldn't be sexually manipulated or indoctrinated or conditioned. They should be children. They should be able to learn about the world and about themselves without being abused or turned into the object of gratification for an adult. This is a simple proposition. What isn't so simple is that in order to achieve a world where that is the case, you have to get off the sidelines. You have to start going to these rallies. You have to start calling your legislators. You have to start insisting that law enforcement do its job. You have to start exerting pressure. And if they don't want to do their job, you have to fire them because they work for you.
That's right.
It's that
Yeah,
simple. You pay for this. And
I
one of the
agree.
things that you have to start looking at your taxes is an investment. And what I'm not seeing is someone who pays a significant amount of money in taxation at all levels. Where's the return on my investment? At a bare minimum, I expect us to be safe. I expect Charlie Kirk to be able to go to a rally at a publicly funded university and have more than 6 police officers present for a crowd of that size. I expect him to be able to walk away from it alive. That's not an unreasonable expectation given the amount of money we pay for public safety and for the police. I expect in the event that he is assaulted or shot, I expect the crime scene to be secured. And I expect to not see civilians coming up and pulling down cameras and contaminating the scene. I expect to have a better investigation than what I've seen over the last 2 weeks. But then again, maybe my expectation is unfounded because at the end of the day, I spent 3 years on the David Lee Hamblin case, and my expectations ought to be pretty damn low
Mm.
based on what I've seen there. Because for those of you who don't know who David Lee Hamblin is, he's a man who in 2013 was recorded apologizing to his daughter for raping her, and he wasn't convicted of a single count. He wasn't even taken to trial. His daughter didn't even get a pretrial hearing to testify against him. The prosecutors dropped the charges against him. They've done that in another case as well. This is a man who admitted to the Division of Occupational and Professional Licensing that as a psychologist, he convinced his mentally ill patients that having sex with him was part of their therapy. He is the definition of a predator, and yet he has walked free for every crime he's ever committed. It's that simple. That's the world in which we live in. What I'm saying to you is you pay for it, and you're entitled to a better result given what we pay and given what our government is supposedly established to do. Secure our liberties. And the first condition of liberty is that we're safe to exercise those liberties without being physically assaulted or shot in a public forum. It's that simple. The first condition of liberty is that when we send our children to school, which we pay for, that the people at the school are not raping them. They aren't sexually assaulting them. They aren't indoctrinating them into a value system that normalizes that kind of conduct. Instead, they're teaching them the 3 R's, which is supposedly why we have an educational system: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Sherry, have you noticed a drop off that's perceptible in the reading, writing, and arithmetic skills of children?
Oh, yeah.
I have.
There's
Stacy?
statistics out there that say that so I don't even know what the percents are, but I just heard it this week. The percent of people that know how to read in the elementary or middle school or junior high or high school is 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 way low.
How about you, Anastasia? Have you noticed the declining reading, writing, and arithmetic skills of our younger generations?
I have, and the other thing I've noticed is so many prompts to let AI write for me. So these kids are getting the same prompts where they won't even have the opportunity to be sending text, they'll be written for them or emails. And it's yeah, there's definitely widespread efforts to steal the human mind and to dumb
Yes.
people down.
And that's the thing, that widespread efforts to steal the human mind and to steal human dignity and to steal virtually everything else that makes
Yeah,
us human.
yeah, true.
And
Mhm.
and what I'm saying to you is what these women have presented, what every survivor who will ever appear on this podcast will present, is a deliberate effort to steal the human mind, crush the human spirit as it pertains to the individuals who suffer this abuse, but also the individuals who are culturally and socially conditioned to dismiss it
Mm.
as a conspiracy, as though someone would make this up. Like someone would just subject themselves to this. The ridicule that you face as someone who talks about MK Ultra, organized extreme abuse, as you've termed it, they don't consider the merits of the argument. They
Well,
don't
it
consider
is
this.
changing though, I have to say.
It, It
I've
is.
seen it in the comments when they are posting survivors talking. As you know, Sherry had hers recently. The the masses are they are starting to wake up more. It used to be much brutal, more brutal. Now people ask questions or they're believing, and I think podcasts like this have a huge part of that.
We're turning the tide and we're going to build a more decent world.
Mhm. Yeah, I
You
think
know,
we are.
at the end of the day, it will take work.
Yeah.
And it'll take a sense so that you never arrived at the destination because believe me, these people will never fully go away. You're going to have to be vigilant even after you feel like you've succeeded. And you're going to have to look out for them because they're never going to go away. They're going to try to get in positions where they can access your children. They're going to try to be teachers. They're going to try to be pediatricians. They're going to try to be therapists. They're going to try to be coaches. They're going to put themselves in a position where they can access their prey. And that's what you need to think of these people as. They are predators looking to access prey. And those prey are your children, the children in your neighborhood, in your community. And you have an obligation as an adult to stay vigilant. If you see something that doesn't add up, if you see something that doesn't feel right, don't be afraid to say something about it. The reality is, someone who's inappropriate should have the obligation to explain why they're being inappropriate or why they appear inappropriate. They should be the ones on the defensive, not you.
Hmm.
And if a child says anything to you, that's even if you think it sounds outrageous and unbelievable, believe them. And the more that we can say truth about what this is, just like Anastasia said, rape trafficking. It's like that is the truth. That's the reality. It's not sex trafficking, it's rape. And these are things that are done to a child. And the things that are done to a child or a teenager, anybody that's under the age of consent, and even afterwards, if it's not consensual, it is rape.
That's
And the
right.
thing is, it's the truth that sets us free. And the more we talk, like on podcasts like here, the survivors can talk and say, this is what happened to me. I mean, for one thing, if I was going to make something up, I would make up something good, you know, like something
Yeah.
wonderful. But I want
Yeah,
to say this. I want to say to those of you who rape children, cover it up, pay for survivors to have a place to live. Shame on you. I want to say that. I just want to say that because so much shame and guilt and blame and goatscaping and gaslighting is done to children for so many years. And then they're forced, and I do mean forced, to perpetrate against other children. And they're trained to become and think as if they're an adult, as if they have that capacity to make choices like that, which are not choices. All their choices are taken away. I want to say to every survivor that is hearing this podcast and maybe heard anything about having to perpetrate or being, maybe you're one of the people that is having your rent paid for or whatever. That is nothing to be ashamed of. The not the rent, but the perpetration that is forced upon us when we're a child is is a classic thing that these evil people do. And they do it because they want to cause so much shame and heap so much guilt on that child that they will just give in and believe anything. And then that person grows up with that shame, and the shame does not belong to any of you. It is not
no.
yours to carry.
The shame
Those things were
is
done to you. You did not
yeah.
choose ever. That
Thank
was never a choice.
you.
Tell me, the shame goes to the institutions that covered up, whether they're governmental or ecclesiastical, to the individuals who aid and abet those institutions in covering this up. Doesn't go to you. At a bare minimum, the church owes you room and board. if the perpetrator was concealed by the church. It, it's that simple. I'm not saying that they don't owe you something. They owe you everything.
Do.
Your life was taken.
I
And,
just,
and
I want to acknowledge something. Pardon my interruption. I just really honor this vision. I'm just feeling this vision, this spiritual like holding of this heartfelt prayer that survivors can have safe places to live without having to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
yeah,
I have my caravan blog and I don't make much money with it, but we had a donation of a couple $100. I knew two survivors living in their car and boop, I just sent that money right to them. Why should any survivor be living in their car? It's just so tragic. And so we tried to be a broker at my organization for donations and we got kind of overwhelmed, but we gave away a significant amount until we shut down that part of what we were doing because we just didn't have enough people to run it basically. But I don't know how, but somehow that is my prayer that survivors can have a place to live and can work on healing from safety because that is the problem with any outpatient clinic. If someone's going to just go home and be abused, it just undoes everything. So yeah, that I have to wrap up pretty soon here, but I'm hearing you say that and I'm resonating so much with let's change that. Like if the church with all those billions of dollars has extended enough into funding people with room and board, then let them remove the NDA and extend the funding and get everyone a safe place to live. That is like the bare minimum. I just thank you. Thank you for that. That's
yeah.
my prayer.
I mean, it's the issue I see is there's a lot of noise and a lot of rhetoric about how wrong this is. Thank you for stating the obvious that it's wrong that this occurs. Like at the end of the day, if someone's hungry and you tell them, as the Bible says, go and be blessed, go and be full, but you don't feed them,
Yeah, that's
what
right.
use? What use is you telling them to go on the? You have to feed them. They have practical needs, and these survivors have practical needs. My wife has spent 3 years trying to build this organization to address those practical needs.
Yeah, it's the
And
first thing that comes up.
it's like getting blood from a rock to ask for donations for this.
I know.
These people need shelter, they need medical treatment. When you read a survivor's medical report and her gynecologist talks about the inside of her vagina looking like shredded meat.
Ugh, yeah, it's
I'm
so
sorry for being graphic, but
no, it's disgusting what perpetrators do to victims.
in terms of the object rape, it's beyond anything sadistic that you could ever imagine. I don't want you to imagine it, but that person has practical needs going forward.
That's right.
And you're never going to be able to fully heal them, but you could at least make the effort to give them a place to stay, to give them free counseling, to give them the means to kind of put their life back to some semblance of functionality to where they can go and do the basic things in life that we all take for granted, like holding down employment, getting a paycheck, having your own place. Like, it's not anything all that difficult. Like people
I
act like
totally agree with you
it's
because people who go
impossible.
through extreme trauma need extra help. It's just common
Too.
sense. They need
Uh,
extra help.
a lot of
They
people
have so many needs.
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of people who talk about this, they talk about all the government should do it or the church should do it. The reality of it is there are private organizations like Relentless Hope who are trying to do this and running into brick walls in the process. Now, to the survivors that Relentless Hope does help with, like counseling and whatnot, it appears to be a godsend. But on the scale at which um, we really need to be operating, what I'd say to you is if you're watching this, you have a Netflix or a Hulu subscription, you can spend $120 a year watching a streaming service, but you can't spare $120 for a 501c. House Holding Out Hope, Relentless Hope, any number of other organizations that are out there. You can spare that money, $10 a month to support that. That's inexcusable. At the
It
end of the day,
is.
it's going to be a long, hard road to help these people, but we need to wrap this up. I want to stress to you, I don't care who you donate money to or who you wind up helping, but understand it takes physical resources to address this, and that gets lost in the sauce a lot. I'd like to thank our guest, Stacy Sprout. I know she has to go. She has obligations. She's kind of a big deal, if I'm being honest. Um, in the
Aw,
survivor community, she's kind of a big deal. You
Yes.
should you should see her Telegram channel. It's extremely impressive. I mean, hundreds of posts that she schedules a day. And then I'd like to thank
thank you.
our co-host Sherry. Um, my wife will be back in the next week, thank God. Uh,
Oh, thank you for filling in today,
Thank
Coel.
and
you.
my
Wow.
We
wife will
will.
be my wife will be back, and she won't go on long-winded monologues like I do sometimes. She'll be
It's
much more
okay. You added to
conversational,
it.
and
We will have a part two and have Anastasia back with us so she can share more of her story and more of how she got where she is today. Because we heard more of the abuse stuff. But I just want to say that thank you, Anastasia. And survivors do have so many needs, and they're trained to think they don't have needs and they're not worth having needs. And so much dehumanization and mind control, and a lot of the reason they don't ask for help is because they've never been allowed to ask for anything. And so that makes it so if they do make a commitment and discover that they have choices, then they can't even follow through because they're so used to having someone tell them what to do, or the programming, leading them. And so there is hope, though. I love the name Relentless Hope because there is hope. And God is greater than any of the evil that happens in this world. And so I want to leave you with that today, that I encourage you to believe that, like Anastasia and I got out and we're living our lives as much as humanly possible. And there is hope. And I encourage you to do self-care and whatever you need to do to, pause this video and then return when we have Anastasia back with us. Thank you,
yes,
Anastasia, and
Thank
thank
you
you,
so
Goel.
much. Oh, thank you both. I just want to say this has been very healing for me. I so appreciate your loving, nurturing presence, Sherry, your kindness and encouragement, and Goel. I really benefited from your masculine strength and saying, this is wrong. We need to do
mucho
more.
macho.
Survivors are worth it. You don't have to take on someone else's shame. The rapist is responsible for the rape. Those are really important messages for everyone to hear, for me to hear, for men to hear. So I just feel so grateful to have been here with you and be delighted to come back sometime. And I hope people can come to the march. October 20th, 5:30 p.m., Pioneer Park. Wear white, bring white balloons. We're going to have some sharing. We'll have awards. I can't say more because I don't have a ton of time, but Cindy Metcalf is going to be one of our keynote speakers. Buffy Snell is another keynote speaker. They are amazing women.
Women warriors, warrior
Oh my
women.
gosh.
Yes, warrior
Yes,
women.
they are brilliant and I can't wait to hear what they're going to say, and then we're going to march around the neighborhood and not on the streets. We're not going to disrupt. It's not allowed. It's not violent. It's completely peaceful. It's kind of silent. We can carry signs, but it's really more just about holding the space for innocence. And then we meet again and there's a vigil prayer. Sometimes there's music. It's just whatever whoever shows up wants to do. So hope you can join us there and thank you so much.
We'll see you
And
in
listeners, you
October.
can, yeah, definitely. And listeners, you can find Anastasia's work or connect with her at www.soarglobal.com, and that's spelled SOAARGLOBAL.
Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you for
I'm
being here.
Goel. I'm Goel with investigationsandritualabuse.com. Um, and a Substack called Investigations of Ritual Abuse. Sherry, what's your website?
It's arisandShineAfterAbuse.com.
Right. And of course, I would be remiss not to point out that we are Relentless Hope, and that is relentlesshopeforyou.com, with the number 4 in
I
it.
think it's .org.
Or .org? I don't know. .org or .com. You
Maybe
can
it's
polish you
one
can
or the other.
polish your typing skills. Let's see. I'll look it up real quickly. My wife's gonna kill me. It's
I
actually,
should know
well,
these
no,
things too.
it's FOR, relentlesshopeforyou.org. Um,
Okay.
so yeah, so we've at the top of the website, we've got a very important petition for you to sign, involving uh changing the law back. Recently, the leader of the Utah State Senate, the president of the state Senate, J. Stewart Adams, had the law changed to benefit his 18-year-old granddaughter who had raped a 13-year-old. As you do in Utah, you know, things have got to change. And I think many of you watching out there today, uh, or when this episode airs, are going to have that attitude that things have to change. And you can sign that petition uh, at the top of our website. You can also donate at relentlesshopeforyou.com or at Stacy's website or at Sherry's website, I'm sure. Hit the donate button. Support those of us who are trying to shine a light on this and provide services to those who have suffered from this. Scowell for Relentless Hope and Investigations in Relentless Abuse, Ritual Abuse. It is relentless abuse as well.
It is.
Signing off. We thank you for watching, and we will see you next time. Or my
Thank,
wife will see you next time, and everyone will sigh a sigh of relief.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anastasia. Thanks, Goel.
You're welcome.
All right, guys. My wife will cut this, and I'm sure that my rants will be shortened.
Thank you both. I'm gonna
Thank
sign
you
off because
too.
I have a
All
call,
right.
but it's so great to see you. I hope to see you
Yeah.
soon.
Yes,
We'll
I'll try
do.
to connect with you soon.
Okay, sounds great.
All
Bye.
right.
Talk
Bye-bye.
to you later.
Okay, talk to you later. Thank you. Great job. Bye.
Thank you.